are looking at comes from the book The Dawn of Everything, A New History of Humanity by David Graeber and David Wengrow. This is what caught my eye. It's talking about the origins of the Enlightenment in the 1700s. So I'm just going to read from here. Of course, this isn't usually the way historians of ideas tell this story. Not only are we taught to think of intellectual history as something largely produced by individuals writing great books or thinking great thoughts, but these great thinkers are assumed to perform both these activities almost exclusively with reference to each other. As a result, even in cases where Enlightenment thinkers openly insisted they were getting their ideas from foreign sources, as the German philosopher Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz did when he urged his compatriots to adopt Chinese models of statecraft, there's a tendency for contemporary historians to insist they weren't really serious, or else that when they said they were embracing Chinese, Persian, or indigenous American ideas, that these weren't really Chinese, Persian, or indigenous American ideas at all, but ones they themselves had made up and merely attributed to exotic others. Now that footnote, number 2, says, many examples of this tendency are discussed in David Allen Harvey's 2012, The French Enlightenment and Its Others. Okay? These are remarkably arrogant assumptions, as if Western thought, as it later came to be known, was such a powerful and monolithic body of ideas that no one else could possibly have any meaningful influence on it. It's also pretty obviously untrue. Just consider the case of Leibniz. Over the course of the 18th and 19th century, European governments gradually came to adopt the idea that every government should properly preside over a population of largely uniform language and culture, run by a bureaucratic officialdom trained in the liberal arts whose members had succeeded in passing competitive exams. It might seem surprising that they did so, since nothing remotely like that had existed in any previous period of European history. Yet it was almost exactly the system that had existed for centuries in China. Now, what I find interesting here, the word bureaucratic, in one of Carl Sagan's Cosmos episodes, he's talking about the constellations and how the Chinese were very creative in what they saw in the sky. They saw a bureaucrat riding on an elephant, I think. So, are we really to insist that the advocacy of Chinese models of statecraft by Leibniz, his allies and followers, really had nothing to do with the fact that Europeans did, in fact, adopt something that looks very much like Chinese models of statecraft? What is really unusual about this case is that Leibniz was so honest about his intellectual influences. When he lived, church authorities still wielded a great deal of power in most of Europe. Anyone making an argument that non-Christian ways were in any way superior might find themselves facing charges of atheism, which was potentially a capital offense. And the footnote here says, a notorious example was that of Christian Wolff, W-O-L-F-F, the most famous German philosopher in the period between Leibniz and Kant, K-A-N-T. He too was a xenophile and lectured on the superiority of Chinese modes of government, with the ultimate effect that an envious colleague who denounced him to the authorities, a warrant was issued for his arrest and he was forced to flee for his life. So, I'm glad we don't live in those times, but it's interesting to see how, where did the origins of Western thought and the government that eventually became the United States Constitution really come from? Well, I think Leibniz had a part in bringing Eastern thought into discussion that later philosophers expanded on. So I wanted to explore this a little bit further. So I found this book by Maria Rosa Antognaza, Leibniz, a very short introduction. Now, Maria also wrote this full biography of Leibniz, which is a scholarly work. Maybe one day I'll get to that. So to better understand Leibniz, this is the very short introduction to his life. So the things that stood out to me were the unique political and religious situation at the time, born into Lutheranism at the time of Westphalia, which was the coexistence of Lutheran, Reformed, and Roman Catholic, and the Duke was allied with the Roman Catholic Habsburgs. So that was a favorable time to be born. And his father left a house full of books. Well, let's thank his father for doing that. It gave him unusual opportunities to read widely without close parental supervision. That is special in those times. Okay, so this was fascinating to me. By reading through parallel literature on contested issues, that is Ted Nelson's ideal that he's been trying for all his life to bring to us. Parallel literature, going back to that. It was in the Middle Ages, it was in books, but our computer screens have become paper and books. The young Leibniz developed a conciliatory and ecumenical outlook strikingly at odds with the narrowly confessional views of his immediate and extended family. Well, that's to be expected. So he regarded himself as an autodidact. His outlook, he had inspirational university professors, and they gave him scholastic Aristotelianism and heavily theologized Platonism fascination with mathematics. So he had a well-rounded education. Then he got a bachelor, master. He had to get a doctorate in law. So he was in law school. His life's calling was to piece back together the fragments of a world torn apart by religious, political, and intellectual divisions into a new universal synthesis for the glory of God and the happiness of humankind. Well, that's an ambitious plan. So, starting his career out, well, he was lucky he had a tolerant and intellectually lively court of an archbishop. He met patrons who opened for him new perspectives. So he had a Patreon account. How about that? And he conceived the first version of an overarching plan of reform and advancement of all the sciences. So that's the optimism of when you're in your 20s, that you've got the plan, you're going to do all this. Okay, and then his influences that he considers are the elements of philosophy, the first principles of metaphysics, of logic, of mathematics, of physics, and ethics and politics are practical philosophy. So he was able to hold all this in his mind as he worked. His patron, facilitating a 4-year trip to Paris. So you could see how important patrons were if they recognized talent. And he returned as an accomplished mathematician who had invented nothing less than the infinitesimal calculus. Amazing. Did he steal it from Newton? No. It's in his mind how he could synthesize all this into calculus for calculating areas under curves and differentiation. And what's fascinating, he met Christian Huygens and Baruch Spinoza. So he had this philosophy emerging throughout his life. And he wanted to stretch the narrow belief of his official duties to further his all-embracing plan of reform. So like Einstein, he daydreamed at work. In Hanover, he became a court counselor and librarian to a duke, head of the Gulf family. And that name is important later. So that's where he was, in Hanover. Far cry from Paris and London, but the Duke was a congenial patron with whom Leibniz could share his grand vision of the Catholic demonstrations, which is the paper talked about earlier, with has his philosophy. But the Duke died, and then things became difficult. So 2 successive dukes had little time for his enlightened appeals for the common good. Rather, okay, we got work to do here. The legal, learning, ingenuity, and industry. Oh, yeah, here, work on the productivity of the silver mines. There you go, Leibniz. The most important source of income, huh? And he come up with some technical innovation. So even in times of difficulty, he found a way to advance himself and be productive within the context of his world. Elegance of engineering was not matched by practical results. So he had to play the dance of showing him, hey, yeah, I'll give you this in 6 months, this in a year, but it didn't work out. So then, okay, I'll mine the archives of Europe. That's the mining I'll do. Yeah, let me find historical proof of your family. And then he eventually found something that was a key plank in the Duke's claim to an elevated status of electors. And this became so important that if they elected the Holy Roman Empire, they were able to form the Reichstag, the legislature. So then he said, okay, I'm going to do a full-fledged history of this family for you. That'll be my life's goal. And then, okay, I got to go travel abroad for that. So then his employers, where the hell is he? Where in the world is Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz? Well, he's toward Germany, Austria, Italy. He wanted to meet European savants, scientists, and technicians. So he's establishing his network. So once back in Hanover, he would disappear from his desk for months or even years at a time. How nice. So then his employer says, oh, this guy wants to achieve everything. He delights in endless correspondence and shuttling to and fro to satisfy his insatiable curiosity. He's useless. He can't pull anything to a close. He can't finish anything. So it would be, you're going to get nothing useful from him. Here's my letter of recommendation. Well, he's irreplaceable too. So, inclination to conceive grand new schemes rather than finishing older ones. Yeah, that's what this really shows. And he's irreplaceable as he was ungovernable. Doesn't that tell you something? Genius is ungovernable. You can't stick him in a box with a Kanban board. Leibniz was neither a gentleman of leisure nor a clergyman or university professor. We'd have to publish all the time and teach all the time. So that didn't work for him, to make money and just sit back and watch sitcoms all day. So he was perceived by his employer as an irritating distraction from his duties as legal advisor, librarian, histographer, and a stretch mining engineer. Okay, so these theoretical writings were an irritating distraction. He didn't do his duties, what he's being paid for. He was just trying to save the world. So he understood himself as sort of a science and culture minister without portfolio, in perennial search of an enlightened ruler who'd give the backing for these goals. And this is what I find important. Establishment of academies of sciences. Reform and rationalization of public administration. Boy, could we use that. Establishment of medical statistics geared at the prevention of illness, not the pharmaceutical treatment of illness. A public health system, life insurance, or system of financial protection of widows and orphans. Well, that's good. Life insurance, we have to look into the origin of that to really understand why it came about. Political advice on matters closer to his own heart, above all how to secure stability in the Holy Roman Empire and hence a peaceful political order. So he wanted peace. He wanted this war crap to end, just like we do today. So people described the empire, dum bum 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 ba-dum bum ba-dum, copyright strike, as a multi-headed monster. Leibniz regarded it, rather like the latest historical scholarship today, as an alternative model of shared sovereignty. Whoa, what is that? Territorial autonomy could be combined with a central imperial authority. So you could be in an empire if you have shared sovereignty and territorial autonomy. And religion can cohabit peacefully in a balanced representative Reichstag. If you have all these shared sovereigns with territory represented in a Reichstag or legislative branch, then you have some checks and balances against the Emperor Palpatine. A strong Holy Roman Empire was a key condition for lasting peace in Europe, because you had France on the west, the Ottomans to the east. Okay, into the Valley of Death. So, balance of power in Europe. Isn't that amazing? If you have a strong Holy Roman Empire, you have balance of power in Europe at the time. And he thought, okay, you got to have a Protestant successor in Great Britain, and that will counterbalance the political gains of the Catholics. So if everybody is represented in government, you have the checks and balances. And if he taught that to Locke and the other influencers of our founders of the United States, then this is critical. His life was critical to our freedom today, which we think we have. It's a false sense of freedom. But it's in the Constitution if we can preserve it. But sorry, Ben Franklin, we're not doing a good job of that. Okay, House of Hanover provided him security with benefits, political vision, platform for his vision and ventures. So this is what a genius needs. He needs some false sense of security and benefits. That's enough for him to do his work and do his thinking. And he needed this. This is special. Protection and intellectual sympathy of two extraordinary women who happened to be in positions of power, and a few dukes. Hey, Duke. A ducal library. Duke of... Sorry, YouTube. In Berlin, at the increasingly powerful royal court of Brandenburg, Prussia, he had his most cherished friend and unwavering ally, who happened to be the wife of the Prussian king. So he had to have the love and nurturing from these people who happened to be women. In Berlin, founding the Academy of Sciences, hallelujah, and Habsburg in Vienna, he tried, welcomed by influential supporters. So there were some people with money who looked at his proposals, promising contacts. Okay, go to the Russian Tsar, Peter the Great. He's got some money. And ambitions never materialized on the scale he wished, but he shuttled between all these places to get the intellectual stimulation he craved. So that's what people like us need, intellectual stimulation. And complement the exceptionally broad network connecting him to 1,300 correspondents. Imagine that. That's his buddy list. And his followers on Twitter. So he was so gregarious, a great conversationalist, treasured the distractions of lively intellectual exchange. That was the YouTube of the day, which was real lively intellectual exchange, not the filter bubbles and stuff we got the crap we got to filter through. Distinguishing features, the scope and depth of his correspondence. That's what he left us. So this color means I found it important. His illuminating accounts are to be found in discussions with epistolary partners who forced him to refine aspects of his theories or demanded that they be restated in clearer terms. So if you have people who can help you saying, hey, nobody's going to understand your chicken scratch, you need to rewrite that a little bit clearer. And that is important for people who think like Leibniz. So debated, metaphysical, physical, mathematical, correspondence, mature views on a wide range of issues, the nature of space and time. So he's ahead of his time, thinking about time and Stephen Hawking stuff. Even while he was still smarting from wounds inflicted by the protracted priority war of the discovery of the calculus, which pitted Leibniz against Isaac Newton and his army of followers. So he suffered from the same plague of intellectual credit taking, and Ted Nelson understands that very well. So he composed new essays of virtual conversation with John Locke. That is fascinating. So John Locke, he was conversing, influencing John Locke's thinking, which influenced the development of the United States theory of government. A lifetime of debate and reading. So his ideas are maturing over time, just as mine are and everyone else's are. And he's trying to publish it all in a theodicity of 1710. And then people don't understand it. Please clarify it for us. So he did 2 agile pamphlets. What's an agile pamphlet? How can a pamphlet be agile? That's fascinating, thinking in terms of agile programming, software development. So I guess he's issuing versions of it. Principles of Nature and of Grace, and monadology, which is a concept used in computer science today. If you look at PowerShell and how the origin of that. Okay, paucity of writings printed in his lifetime. I found it fascinating. It's only about 30 pages actually printed of the you'll see how many later. He introduced a new branch of physics to the study of forces, of dynamics. Wow. And philosophical essays on everything, piled in manuscript form, even book-length discussions. So he just wrote and wrote, similar to what we're learning about Emily Dickinson from Apple TV, like a whole chest of poems just in her quarters, in her room. The monadology, that's something I want to understand later, but 522 pieces totaling 3,000 pages, and only 3 adding up to scarcely 20 pages were published by himself. So Lulu, he tried to self-publish, and I need to thank Ted Nelson again for publishing all those books so we could go through them at our pace once we get through the insanity we're living through, or while we're getting through the insanity we're living through. So, over 3 centuries since his death, his writings are slowly leaking out, and we're seeing his thought change as he got older, so we're still learning about him. His intellectual interests were glimpsed only by his regular correspondents and trusted friends, who spread rumors of unique gifts throughout the contemporary Republic of Letters. So that was the internet, the Republic of Letters, and only the people who had access to that republic were able to understand that. Yeah, so he didn't get many views on YouTube. There was an intense privately as well as engaging public side to his intellectual life, but these were 2 sides of the same coin. Public and private, so don't listen to Bertrand Russell. He wasn't a Janus. So he was largely free from the compulsion to publish. Isn't that great? So he was able to explore his ideas and refine them over the years and keep his manuscripts. Oh, I'm not ready. I can't just put this out just because you need an article for this year. The value of each publication was measured with reference to his main aim and objectives. Leibniz was a man of synthesis and reconciliation. His overarching goal was the improvement of the human condition. And by learning all this stuff, it's in the service of life and aimed at the happiness of humankind. How do you define happiness? What is real happiness? Owning Apple products, huh? or something more spiritual. Disagreement and misunderstanding. What was this? Most striking philosophical views would have bred disagreement and misunderstanding, so he held back a lot of his stuff. Keep it to yourself. And he knows it's all part of his development, but he saw the fragile confessional situation in Germany. So you have to have a sense of the environment you're living in and how your words are going to be perceived. And you don't want to prematurely release your work while it's still sketchy or controversial. So in the decentralized internet community, there's the notion of develop, but don't ship it. Learn from it and make it better. Work on it. And what had to happen is Queen Anne had to die. Poor Queen Anne. And then the British crown passed to Hanover. So he dropped everything. He was hoping to reap dividends from this. Here's your opportunity. But he's not allowed. You can't cross the channel. He didn't have a vaccine passport, so he couldn't get to London. So, hey, you've been working on this history. Where is it? Are you done yet? No. Well, he died. He couldn't finish it. 1716. And in 60 years, what happened? The threads of history are fascinating. Innumerable unfinished projects, and he leaves a mountain of unpublished papers, but happiness depended more on a vision for a better future. And there are people today who have that vision and no one's listening to them, or just a few, or they think they're getting people to listen, but maybe they're not. Because there are forces at work against them that we don't even understand. One should always find something to do, to think, to plan. That's his advice for us. Find something to do, think and plan, yet in a way that we can rejoice if our wishes are fulfilled and not be saddened if they're not. That is wisdom for us. So think about a better world, plan for it, write about it, but it may not get fulfilled, so don't be sad, but just keep that optimism, and there's where you get your happiness. It's never in complete satisfaction where there's nothing left to desire. So happiness always has that continual aspiration, which I quote from Edwin Abbott, who wrote Flatland. And that was, okay, which would render our mind stupid. If you have nothing left to desire, your mind atrophies. But perpetual progress to new pleasures and new perfections. So you're never perfect, but you're asymptotically reaching a form of perfection. You're trying to perfect your work, and you get pleasure from the incremental details that you discover. And that's all I wanted to read from this book to share with you, because it's urgent at the time we're living in that we learn as much as we can about how freedom was created and how it needs to be preserved.
Is particularly alarming, in terms of all of these numbers, excess mortality and morbidity, is that the people that put these three HIV proteins into the shots disarmed people's natural immunity. They gave them vaccine-induced AIDS, and they didn't give them anything to reverse it. So now what you're seeing in terms of all-cause morbidity and mortality, the numbers that I got came out of the U.S. Department of Defense's own database called DMED. It's the Defense Medical Epidemiology Database. So again, going back to my lawsuit against the DoD, I called several expert witnesses who testified in both our temporary restraining order and in our preliminary injunction, one of whom was Dr. Teresa Long. You might have seen her. and some notable other ones, including Dr. McCullough. So we have come to understand all this with a group of medical experts and scientists that have come to our aid in understanding all of this. I mean, everything that I'm telling you, I can back up with evidence, and I will be happy to do that. What is almost more concerning, let me get back to that. So when you see a 1,100% increase in all-cause morbidity and mortality, that means something systemic has caused this problem. So you would see a natural, actually an abnormal increase in all-cause cancer, heart issues, inflammation issues, blood clotting. And I can actually send you what that looks like on a per malady basis. But when you see all of them arising to hundreds of percentiles in a class of people who are physically fit from 18 to 45, these are all military people, there is only one cause for that. And that is the destruction of their immune system. So that is the vaccine-induced autoimmune deficiency syndrome. We know this now. In fact, it's in science all around, and the Israelis, they're ahead of everybody else. They already published papers on this. Everybody knows that. So the short answer to this whole thing is that everybody that got the shots was given some form or level of AIDS, autoimmune deficiency syndrome. The ones that got the one shot, it seems that they have about 30% of their natural immunity destroyed. By the time they get 3 shots, all their natural immunity is completely gone. And we're seeing that with our doctors, experts that are testifying in their practices, including on-base and off-base doctors that have come to see us. The real epidemic is now. I happen to be in the morbidity business. I'm the CEO of a large insurance group, and we underwrite morbidity risks, principally disability, accident, sickness, and health. Based on what it is we are seeing, the rates right now, excess mortality at 84%, excess every kind of disease at 1,100%. We are expecting a 5,000 or so % increase in excess mortality for this year. An enormous number. I don't think that it's by coincidence, by the way, that Moderna has now just received licensure of their emergency use authorization HIV vaccine. So they gave everybody AIDS, and now here's your salvation is this vaccine, which seems to be a multiple dose vaccine.
Good morning, Chaverim. Today I want to read Psalms 120 through 125 in the Amplified Bible. I like Amplified because I need amplification because my brain can't know it all. So these are called A Song of Ascents, and there's a footnote. Possibly the 15 psalms known as the Songs of Degrees of Ascents were sung by the caravans of pilgrims going up to attend the annual feasts at Jerusalem, but it is quite as possible that the title has reference to some peculiarity in common with the music or the manner of using it. Okay, so that's a scholarly interpretation. And I'm going to give you a speculative interpretation that the psalm numbers correspond to years. So Psalm 120 refers to 2020, 121 refers to 2021, etc. And listen to these words and see if that makes sense to you. Okay, Psalm 120, A Song of Ascents. In my distress, I cried to Yahweh, and he answered me. I'm just going to say Yah. Deliver me, O Yah, from lying lips and from a deceitful tongue. Think about 2020. What shall be given to you, or what more shall be done to you, you deceitful tongue? Sharp arrows of a mighty warrior, with glowing coals of the broom tree. Glowing coals of the broom tree. Think about that. Arrows. Uh-oh. We didn't have it in 2020. Woe is me that I sojourn with Meshech, M-E-S-H-E-C-H. I don't know what that is. and that I dwell beside the tents of Kedar, as if, in brackets, as if among notoriously barbarous people. And references are Genesis 10:2, 25:13, and Jeremiah 49:28 and 29. Verse 6, my life has too long had its dwelling with them who hates peace. That's a wake-up call. I am for peace, but when I speak, they are for war. Were we able to speak in 2020? Psalm 121, 2021, a song of ascents. I will lift up my eyes to the hills, around Jerusalem, to sacred Mount Zion and Mount Moriah. From whence shall my help come? Jeremiah 3:23. My help comes from Yah, who made heaven and earth, Shamayim and Haaretz. Verse 3. He will not allow your foot to slip or to be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. 1 Samuel 2:9, Proverbs 3:23-26, Psalm 127:1, and Isaiah 27:3. So this is why we need parallel text, so you can see all these in parallel. Verse 4, behold, he who keeps Israel, will neither slumber nor sleep. And Israel does not refer to the state, it refers to the people of Abraham. Yah is your keeper. Yah is your shade on your right hand, the side not carrying a shield. Isaiah 25:4. The sun shall not smite you by day, nor the moon by night. Psalm 91:5, Isaiah 49:10, and Revelation 7:16. Yah will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. Yah will keep your going out and your coming in from this time forth and forever. Deuteronomy 28:6, Proverbs 2:8, and 3:6. So you're going out and you're coming in. 2021. 2022, Psalm 122. I was glad when they said to me, let us go to the house of Yah. Isaiah 2:3, Zechariah 8:21. So who said to me, oh, you could go out and you could worship now with your fellowship. You don't need a mask. I was glad when they said that, right? It's 2022. Our feet are standing within your gates, O Jerusalem. Jerusalem, which is built as a city that is compact together, to which the tribes go up, even the tribes of Yah, as was decreed, and as a testimony for Israel, to give thanks to the name of Yah. For there thrones of judgment were set, the thrones of the house of David. So remember, David is writing these Psalms, and maybe he went into the fourth dimension and saw the future. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. That's a song. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Okay, but I can't sing anymore because a barbarous copyright law is about to be passed in the United States. May they prosper that love you, the holy city. Peace be within your walls and prosperity within your palaces. For my brethren and companions' sake, I will now say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of Yah, our Yah, I will seek, inquire for, and require your good. That's 2022. I'm just going to read. I'm not going to try to interpret it from now on. Psalm 123, a song of ascents. Unto you do I lift up my eyes, O you who are enthroned in heaven. Behold, as the eyes of servants look to the hand of their master, and as the eyes of a maid to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to Yah, our God, our Yah, until he have mercy and loving kindness for us. Have mercy on us, O Yah, have mercy and loving kindness for us, for we are exceedingly surfeited, surfeited, with contempt. Our life is exceedingly filled with the scorning and scoffing of those who are at ease, and with the contempt of the proud, irresponsible tyrants who disregard Yah's law. That's what we have to look forward to next year, 2023. Psalm 124. If it had not been the Yah who was on our side, now may Israel say, if it had not been Yah who was on our side when men rose up against us, then they would have quickly swallowed us alive when their wrath was kindled against us. Us is the world's people. Then the waters would have overwhelmed us and swept us away. The torrent would have gone over us. Then the proud waters would have gone over us. I'm reminded of the song at the sea, the Egyptians. Blessed be Yah, who has not given us as prey to their teeth. We are like a bird escaped from the snare of the fowlers. The snare is broken, and we have escaped. Our help is in the name of Yah, who made heaven and earth. My impression of those last two verses, it reminds me of liberation and the time of the Holocaust, that the war was ended, and then we found out the truth. That's 2024, something to look forward to, but when we find out the truth, we'll have escaped from the cage, from the snare, but we have to reconcile who we were. Psalm 125. Those who trust, lean on, and confidently hope in Yah are as Mount Zion, which cannot be moved, but abides and stands fast forever. As the mountains are round about Jerusalem, so Yah is round about his people from this time forth and forever. For the scepter of wickedness shall not rest upon the land of the uncompromisingly righteous, lest the righteous, Yah's people, stretch forth their hands to iniquity and apostasy. Do good, O Yah, to those who are good, and to those who are right, with you and all people in their hearts. As for such as turn aside to their crooked ways of indifference to Yah, Yah will lead them forth with the workers of iniquity. Peace be upon Yisrael. We're about to enter the holiday of Passover, remembering the Exodus from Egypt and Yah's hand in our freedom. The journey from slavery to freedom is a theme throughout time, and we learn from the story people were not able to accept the freedom. So Passover is a time to feel that sense of freedom, and the time between Passover and Shavuos, or the Pentecost, is a time to have structure, to gradually add some discipline and structure to that freedom, and then we are ready for living under Yah's law. Interpret that however you need to. The point is, every one of us needs a higher power other than ourselves in order to make it in these next few years and in our lives, places to turn in times of trouble. Many young people, they don't get that yet, but they will as life progresses. Thank you.